and gentlemen, when you do research, you will always work on something that has already been done by somebody else and you want to build on that. And when you build on that, you are bringing in a different perspective to whatever has been found out there. For this purpose, we ask a number of research questions. What is their nature, for example? Research questions, and this is very critical, very crucial, remember this. They offer guidelines to the researcher. To us, if I'm a researcher, for me, I formulate my research question as my guideline, how to proceed on my research, how to proceed with my research. What am I looking for? The research questions also help me look at the limitations of the research. How much am I going to do? What am I going to do? And when I examine the limitations, etc., of my research, that will help me draw up my hypotheses. Victor Teddy has already told you about hypotheses, probably. Hypothesis. Talking about what is going to happen in the thesis. Thesis means knowledge. What is going to happen in that knowledge investigation? That is thesis. And when I anticipate what is going to happen in the thesis, in other words, what is going to happen at the end of my research, that is a hypothesis. And as you know, hypothesis can be proved or disproved, or nothing could happen, what we call a null hypothesis. That's beside the point. But the point is that research questions are meant to help us draw up hypotheses. Number one. Number two, research questions also will help us in designing the research methodology. So it's not just drawing up the hypothesis, but in designing the research methodology, the procedure that we wish to follow. How do we want to go? What kind of a research am I going to carry out? How shall I proceed with it? And so research methodology. So the research questions are very critical in not just giving the end result of the research, but also giving us something to think about the methodology of conducting the research. We'll come to methodology a little later. Now, research questions, number three, anticipate the outcome of the research. What is going to happen when the research ends? So it anticipates. All the research questions anticipate what is going to happen at the end of the research. What am I going to end up with? What will be my last paragraph in the thesis? You see? So in other words, I'm setting the limits. So the research question, the designing of the research question is very critical in identifying, anticipating the expected outcome of research. What I'm saying is very critical, not just for the researchers, but also for the research supervisors. And therefore, if you have some questions, you can certainly raise it a little later. Once I finish my presentation, make a note of your questions, if any. Now, the last point here is that how many research questions should I have? My experience tells me that if I'm able to identify 3 or 4 research questions, prior to starting my research, that will be more than adequate. How do we say it? Mind you, I gave you 2 or 3 points right now that you see it acts as a guideline, it suggests a research methodology, it expects the end of the research. Now, if you use these concepts in your research questions, that will be a research question. And your supervisor should be very happy with it because the supervisor is going to tell you that, okay, now this is how you want to go. And so you have foreseen the end of the research. And therefore, point number one, research questions are extremely crucial for research. Every research should have research questions. I hope this is fairly clear to you. Number two, Nagendra, go to number two now. Now, how do we do our data collection? When you launch on this research, you have to collect some data. And there are different tools and procedures in data collection. What are some of these tools? What are some of these procedures for data collection? Number one, there are about half a dozen of these suggestions. Very important, very critical. Number one, procedure number one is something that you look at whatever has already been done. Examine it, read it, maybe in the library. Bring that information and interpret it. Put it in a new nutshell, which is normally done in research in literature. You want to see Raja Rao in a new perspective as a social reformist, or R.K. Narayan as a social reformist. And so you sit and read quite a lot from R.K. Narayan, about R.K. Narayan, and so you read all this, and finally you give your interpretation of what constitutes your social relevance, for example. What do you mean? So you define that, and so this is a kind of research which generally is library based. And so, number one, you can do a kind of a library based research, which is also research, quite a lot. But this happens quite often in certain subjects only, not in other subjects. If you're working in my area, which is ELT, English language teaching, you can't do this. You can't just sit in the library and then cull out whatever people have talked about, whatever it is, and come out with your research. Perhaps not so much, but you need library, no doubt. You need support, you need data, but that's only one part. Number two, you can do what we may call an empirical research. Empirical, EMPIRICAL. Empirical research is basically experiment-based research, where you carry out an experiment. An experiment could be a field trial. It could be a tryout of new materials. You want to examine how it impacts the learners. You like to carry out a certain issue, a certain problem, maybe a training, and see the results. You may want to have a controlled group and an experimental group and have a comparison of the two. Or you may not have a controlled and experimental group. You may have just an experimental group on who you would like to carry out your research. You try out, collect the data, take out the data, interpret the data. But empirical research is always and experiment-based research. Very popular and very intensive. It requires a lot of preparation, lot of prior thought. You should be able to get your subjects, people, individuals, and then you have to conduct the research on them, and they should be available during the entire period of research. So what people do is, instead of having, just about 25 people in the research, they would like to have 200 people in research, so that the data collected will at least give them about 100 people all the time, because not 200 may not be always present during the entire period of the research. And so one of the limitations of an experimental research is number of subjects who would be available for your experiment. So when you think of the data, you would like to think of the feasibility of conducting an experiment. And so experimental research, research based on tryouts, is what we call empirical research. Now, empirical research is very different from library-based research, as you can understand. Quite obvious. Simply because in an experimental research, you will have to have a new set of research questions, a new set of hypotheses. Because, you see, experimental research will have one major problem, which is what Venkatreddy must have already talked to you about, namely variables. There are far too many factors which influence the research. And all these influencing factors, age could be a factor, health could be a factor, height could be a factor, proficiency could be a competence can be a all these kinds of factors, attitude can be a factor, ego factors can be a problem, background, environment, all kinds of things. All these are what we call variables. And therefore, when you plan an experiment, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you have good control over variables. What does it mean, having a good control over variables? You would like to bring together more like-minded, like-featured people into the experiment, rather than people who have very diverse interests or age factors. You can't, you have 60-year-olds as well as no. You would like to control certain factors and as many variables as you can in an experimental or empirical research. And therefore, we talk of what is called narrowing down the research. And in an empirical research, this is very, very important. The second feature and the last feature in an empirical research is, since you are collecting data and interpreting data, this can turn out to be a quantitative research. Because you're working with quantity more than quality. The quantity will determine a lot of your outcome. And in interpretation, there will be both quantitative as well as qualitative, but more quantitative. And therefore, in an empirical research, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude whatever we are saying, we use statistics. Statistics becomes extremely important in experimental research. As I said, in an experimental research, you can have a control group in an experimental group, or you can have just an experimental group also. No comparison, no control. Number three, in this methodology kind of thing, is field-based data survey. Field-based data survey. Number one was library-based. Number two was empirical research. Number three is field-based data survey. Some people consider a data survey which is field-based, where you get By field-based, we mean collecting data from outside the classroom, from general population, society, etc., etc., etc. Some people consider this as semi-research, not total research. Semi-research simply because a survey can have all the rigor of a research, but still some people treat survey as a semi-research kind of thing, which is not as strictly viewed as other researches. So, in a field-based data survey, you will collect data, you'll gather data, and there will be an interpretation of data. And all this will be based on certain prior judgments. You will have some hypotheses, no doubt. You have some research questions, no doubt. And you would like to interpret this data based on that. And that's why this is called research. And so data interpretation becomes extremely crucial in a field-based data survey. Now, normally these surveys are carried out to come up with very specific, important points relevant to the question. So these are not simple things. Sometimes the survey may take a very long time and you can't do it in a short time. For example, anything which is society related or a product related or whatever it is, if you want to do a survey, what we call a longitudinal survey, where you take time, by the time you finish the research, that product might have disappeared or that entire thing might have gone. It can happen. IT world is changing so fast. We have already gone lost, cassettes, CDs, videos, all these are gone. So what we have is only history, that's all. So today we are changing so fast, and therefore, in field-based survey research, it has to be compact, specific, time-bound, and finished within a short duration of time. Most important. And number 4 is question-based research. What we call a questionnaire. Some people also call it an opinionaire questionnaire, where you ask certain questions. And the questions are usually asked either in a random fashion or in a systematic fashion. This is very important to know. Are your questions fixed? Are you asking the same set of questions to everybody? Or are you asking any question that comes up to your mind? Is it a randomized question survey? Or is it a specific question survey? Are you using specific questions or very general questions? Is how you design a questionnaire-based research. This is also a kind of a survey. Now, what happens here is that, you see, if you ask very structured questions, then you will be collecting structured data. And when you put all of them together, you will be able to identify the specific results, outcomes, suggestions, opinions, and so on and so forth, responses to your search. And therefore, it can become very systematic. Now, it's very important that you exercise a lot of caution simply because this questionnaire or interview-based kind of research have a lot of limitation. You may use a questionnaire, you may also use an interview, you may also videograph the entire thing, you may do all these things, but basically this is a qualitative kind of research. It can be quantitative, but basically this will be a qualitative type of research. And therefore, you have to exercise a lot of caution in interpretation of data, in arriving at conclusions. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, Questionnaire-based, opinionaire-based research is also research. But these are the cautions you have to exercise in conducting such kind of a research. And therefore, you may want to use these questionnaires in a very systematic manner or in a structured manner, but using it randomly may not constitute much of a research as such, and an examiner may not approve that unless it is systematic. By systematic, we mean drawn up, etc., etc., etc. And one of the last things that I want to mention here is something which is very, very crucial. The last type of researchers that we can think of are what we call theory-based or theory-generating research. Very important. Certainly it takes place at a very high level of researching, where a lot is expected of you, of the researcher. Theory-based research hopes to work on a certain theory. It could be, for example, we can work on a theory of feminism, for example, or a theory of, let's say, language acquisition. Now, all these are theories, and you would like to work on those theories, which means that a lot is expected of your knowledge of the theory. And so theory-based research is very complex, but very crucial and highly appreciated. More appreciated than theory-based research is theory-generating research, where you generate a new theory. You use the previous theories available to you and you generate a new theory. Chomsky, for example, generated a new theory of language acquisition. All Nobel laureates generate new theories. Now, this doesn't mean that all other researchers don't have theory at all. No. Every research, from the beginning till now that I have spoken of, whether it's literature-based or language-based or empirical or field-based, whatever it is, all of them should be based on very strong theories. A research will carry no value if it cannot base itself on a theory, if it cannot project a theory, a new theory. Because of the theory, the word theory, we have the word thesis. A thesis is something where you have proposed a new theory. It's your theory. Your research is your new theory. And therefore, an examiner would like to see what is your contribution in this research. Now, when the researcher wants to examine and asks you, what is your theory? Don't give the title of your thesis. No, that is not it. You have to talk about what theory you have based yourself in your research on, and what theory you have generated as a consequence of your research. And therefore, a thesis is based on theories, and therefore, whether either it's theory examination or theory generation, both these are very important. And very lastly, we talk of two kinds of investigations. One is what is known as an a priori investigation. A priori, Priori, a priori investigation, as opposed to a posteriori investigation. Posteriori, Posteriori. What are these? Very simply speaking, a priori always examine the relationship between a cause and an effect. What caused the effect? And so it begins with cause and goes into the effect. If this happens, this happens. Lack of exposure to spoken English results in poor pronunciation. Cause, effect. Training in good pronunciation results in better reading skills. Training in better reading skills results in good communication. Whatever it is. You begin with a cause and end with an effect. And that is called a priori research. So all your researchers can either be a priori or a posteriori is just the opposition. You look at the result, the outcome, and then work towards the cause. Why is it that all the learners of engineering, learners who come to engineering college from coastal areas in Andhra Pradesh, for example, they possess a certain difficulty in reading aloud? Okay, that's it. So you would like to go back to it and then try to find out the causes and carry out a research on the causes, have whatever procedure you follow. So, in other words, when we think of research, there are several tools and procedures for data collection. In data collection, we have looked at half a dozen. We will move one step further now. Move on to number 3, Nagendra. Good. How do we apply research strategies? In other words, how do I carry out my research? How do I start my research? How do I adopt the most appropriate manner of starting a research, doing a research, carrying out a research? That is the strategy. How do I start my research? Many of you should be asking this question. Now, these are what we call critical questions. Very critical, very crucial questions before starting the research. No, don't get terrified by what I have said here, applying research strategies. No, it just means, how do I start my research? That's all. Using appropriate strategies. That's all. Here are a few questions which you should ask as a researcher. There are about nearly 8 to 10 questions, and I want you to think about them very carefully. What are these questions? Question number 1. Is my topic researchable? Is my topic researchable? That means, has somebody worked on this? And can I work more on it? No? Does it interest me? Can I do it? Can I do it successfully? Just because somebody has done it doesn't mean that everybody can do it. No. I must find that interesting enough, challenging enough. Can I do it? Can I do that research? I want to work on developing a vocabulary list for engineering students. Somebody has worked on. Can I do it? Can I carry it out? It's the first question. Is my topic researchable? Is there a research there? Research there. Question number 2. Do I have all the required relevant information about the topic? Do I have all the required relevant information about the topic? Do I have it with me? Or can I have access to all that information, relevant information? Can I get everything about it? Or is it that, okay, the topic is very interesting, but I don't know where to find data about it. I don't know how to proceed with it because no, I don't know. I can't find anything even in the library or on the web. So, do I have? Oh, this is question number 2. Question number 3. Very important. Can I find the source documents needed for my research? And where can I find them? You see how much investigation you have to do. Is it available in my library, our library, in my college? Can I find it on the website? Is it relevant? Is it available, adequate, appropriate, just okay for me, exactly what I need? Or is it all very general kind of? So can I find the source documents? Number 2. Number 3 or number 4, whatever it is. How much can I write about the topic? Now, I may want to think of speaking, communication, writing, reading, everything related, like a khichdi. Is that how I want to do it? Can I do all those things? No. There is what is known as narrowing down the topic. I must narrow down my topic to just 1 or 2 things to find out. That's all. And therefore, that I should be able to write about. And how much can I write about it? Sometimes I may choose a subject on which I can't write more than about 40 pages. No, it can't be researched. No, I can't. I can't write more. It's all over. No. Can I write adequately so that there is a good beginning, there's a good substantiation, sufficient literature review, and then data collection, interpretation, conclusion? Can I have all these things? And is the subject okay for it? So the question is, how much can I write on the topic? Is the 4th question you have to ask. Next question, very critical. How much time do I have to do this research? I want to do all these things. I want to change the entire world, like what Buddha did. But do I have so much time? So how much time do I have? My limitation is only for 3 years. Part-time or is a 5 year. That's all. And I have to manage all these things within the time available. So how much time do I have? Within the time available, can I do the research? Next question is, can I finish in time? Don't want to have too many extensions, and I can't get more than 1 or 2 extensions. Can I finish in time? Next, can I find a supervisor for my topic? Very critical. By supervisor, we mean somebody who is qualified. And by saying qualified, not just somebody who already has a PhD, this. No. Can that person guide me, help me do my research? So such a supervisor who is also interested in what I'm doing, in my topic, and has read, knows the sources, can guide me to those sources, can help me proceed from point 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. That's the supervisor. And so can I find a supervisor? Just because I have interest doesn't mean that there are supervisors available. The supervisor may not be interested in your interest. And therefore, finding a supervisor is very, very critical. Lastly, if I look at my research, does it have my contribution? Have I contributed? Is it my baby? Is it my many questions in that? So therefore, this is exactly what the examiner is going to ask. Okay, you've done it. What have you done? briefly tell me what you have done. See? Therefore, it's not somebody else's supervisor. It's not plagiarism. It's not supervisor's thesis. Not some my friend's thesis. It's not a thesis bought for 25 lakhs, which happens. No, it's my thesis. And therefore, I am ready to ask any questions, answer any questions. I'm being a bit harsh, but please don't misunderstand. This happens. I know what. I'm aware of it. University where this happens. And mind you, your thesis can be rejected on that ground, saying that you have not done it, somebody else has done it, or whatever it is. And therefore, what is the research? My thesis. And similarly, can I say that my research is very unique, very special, an improvement over the previous research, etc., etc., etc.? Very critical. So can I defend my thesis? The feedback that I get from the supervisor or from the examiner, does it help me? Can there be a very positive feedback, a very positive evaluation of my thesis, and something that shows my understanding, my opinion, my ideas, and therefore it's my own thesis. Is it my own thesis? You see? Therefore, finally, one of those research strategies is where you ask a question like, can I defend my thesis? Very important. And so, when we look at these research strategies, what I've tried to do is to ask a few questions to myself about my own research. Check your notes now. I'll repeat them quickly, but check your notes. Number one, is my topic researchable? Can I do it? Can I do it and do it successfully? Number two, do I have all the required and relevant information about the topic? Number three, can I find the source documents, whether it's in library or elsewhere? Next, how much can I write? There is a limitation of chapters and so on. So how much can I write? Do I know that limitation? So next, can I finish my thesis in time? Next, can I find a supervisor? Somebody who can help me in all my respects and so on. Next, what can be my contribution in the research? I must feel proud about myself. Next question, what is the research? In my research, is it a research? Have I done research? And what is the research? And lastly, can I confidently say that this is my research and not somebody else's? It is unique, it is special, it is my contribution to world knowledge. Nobody else has done it on this earth. Only I have done it. And therefore, it is my contribution to world knowledge. Next time somebody wants to do research in this field, they will look at my thesis and proceed from there, go further into their own research and so on. See, so that's my contribution, and do I have that pride? So, therefore, can I defend it with it? I hope this is fairly clear to you. One step further now. Nagendra, please go to number 4. Now, we talked about qualitative and quantitative research some time ago. How do we do this? How do we carry out qualitative and quantitative research? Very important. We should know this. Now, qualitative, as the name suggests, talks about the quality of the outcome. Quantitative is quantify, qualify here. And so qualitative qualitative and quantitative research. What are the critical features of qualitative and quantitative research? Both. Very important. You can make your notes now. We talk of what is known as, when in both these researches, whether you are doing this or that, we talk of, number one, analysis, interpretation, synthesis. In both these researches, the first thing that we talk about is both these researches involve an analysis of whatever it is. Questions, questionnaires, opinionaires, data collection, empirical research, this, that, or library work, whatever. You analyze. And then you interpret based on your theory or theoretical support or whatever hypotheses you have or all the assumptions that you have, all the information that you have, you interpret. And having done the interpretation, then you synthesize. Synthesize is bringing it together, bringing every factor into one whole, solid whole, WHOLE. So, analysis, interpretation, synthesis. Synthesizing at the stage where you do your interpretation of data and drawing conclusions and suggesting future research, identifying the shortcomings in this research, blah, blah, blah. Number two, whether it's quantitative or qualitative research, both involve criticism. Very important. Your interpretation is criticism. You criticize from different perspectives. The quality of your criticism shows your critical thinking abilities. How do you demonstrate that you're capable of thinking critically? A PhD thesis, therefore, is not a small thing. A research is not a small thing. It involves a critical mind, a mind which can think critically and criticize in the right manner, using the right word, the right language, the right terminology, etc., etc., etc. Number two, therefore, is criticism and critical thinking, both of which are very crucial in our interpretation. Number three, some researchers, whether it's qualitative and quantitative, once again, may involve comparisons, comparing data, comparing the output, the outcome. Not compare and contrast like that. No, you should not speak like that. You must be very careful. I am very careful in selecting my words. Comparative research. If you are trying to identify the humanistic values, for example, in Arkenarine and, let's say, Jane Austen, you're comparing two diverse, culturally different, periodically different authors, but looking at one basic issue, the humanistic values, for example. And when you compare how much deeper you have to go into your humanistic values to find out how much of it is there in Arkenarine and how much is there in Jane Austen, for example, or George Eliot, or whoever. And therefore, comparison is very critical in the analysis, whether in qualitative research or quantitative research. Now, compare also can mean contrast. When you arrive at your conclusions, you have compared and you have contrasted also, if that is the objective of your research. If the objective of your research is compare and contrast, then that's what you arrive at. Or if it is just comparison, then you arrive at comparisons and arrive at your conclusions. So point number 3 is comparative research. Comparative research. Number 4, as we talked about some time ago, is theoretical research. If you're working in the sciences, for example, or if you're working in language, again, or in literature, or in whatever else, philosophy, anthropology, or whatever. There are lots of theories. Geography has its own set of theories. Theorizing, therefore, is one critical aspect of qualitative as well as quantitative research. And therefore, either you work on the basis of a theory, which is theoretical research, or you work on theorizing from your research, as we talked about it some time ago. So, in both these researches, whether working on a theory or theorizing, it is theory creation, which is very crucial. Theory creation. For example, in my research, I have worked on bilingualism, mother tongue medium, and reading skills, and I have created what I have called a bilingual reading methodology, by which I mean if you use this methodology, this is applicable for this, in this manner, and when you use this methodology, you have to use the following steps and stages. I have created a theory of bilingual reading methodology. That is theory creation. So, you think of theorizing, theory-based, theory creation, and bringing out your own theory and things like that. So number 4, we have talked about a number of things. And so both in qualitative and quantitative research, I don't have to emphasize this once again because we talk of what is called empirical research. And I hope by now you're very clear about empirical research, which is basically experimenting, data collection, interpretation of data, and conclusions based on this data that you have gathered and things like this. Next is a very critical thing that I want all of you to remember. What we call primary research and secondary research. You can go to something that has been said or done by somebody and base your research entirely on what that person has said in his or her thesis or wherever, book. Wherever. In other words, you go to the primary source. Secondary. Somebody has created something which somebody else has worked on and created something else, and somebody else has also worked on it. And so there are 2, 3 different researchers based on the original research. And in your research, you don't go to the original research number 1. You don't go to that. You go to the second one, or the third one, and you base your research on the second or the third one, which is a secondary source. Nothing wrong, because sometimes we don't get the original. If you ask for example, if you're working on Shakespeare or Marlowe, you can't read Shakespeare or Marlowe in their original text, and we don't know where the original texts are. Then we'll have to go to the secondary source. And again, as another secondary source. And based on that, we'll come back. You want to work on, for example, let's say, T.S. Eliot. Now, T.S. Eliot you can read. But what did T.S. Eliot himself read? And where did he get that? Can you read it? Oh, very difficult. So I can read T.S. Eliot or Wordsworth or Sarojini Naidu and work on that. So similarly on language research and so on, I don't know. I like to read Chomsky himself, but I don't know. But I will read Alice Rinker or somebody else and base my research on what somebody else has said. Pitt Carter, for example. So, in other words, primary research as opposed to secondary research. So you would like to determine whether yours is going to be a primary research, something that's being done for the first time after somebody has done for the first time directly based on that, or second, something else. So we have so far talked about qualitative and quantitative. In a qualitative research, as we have already said, you talk about the qualitative outcome of your research, like in literature, for example. In quantitative research, for example, you come out either based on an experiment, or based on a survey, or based on a questionnaire, and then or based on pre-test, post-test, etc., etc. All this will be quantitative research. So, techniques of analysis and quantitative and qualitative research, as I told you, will have these components. Number one, check your notes again: analysis, interpretation, synthesis. Number two, criticism and critical thinking, critical questions. Number three, comparison, comparative research, compare and contrast. Number four, theoretical research, theorizing, theory based, or theory generating. Number five, empirical research, which you are familiar. Number six, most important, primary sources and therefore primary research or secondary research. And lastly, we have talked about, therefore, qualitative and quantitative. Please go to the next slide, Nagendra. Reliability and validity in research. I'm sure many of you might be familiar with both these concepts called reliability and validity. Validity. Something is valid if it tests what it set out to test and nothing else. You want to prepare rasam, or you want to prepare sambar. Sambar preparation is valid if you end up only with sambar and not rasam, not pappu, not khichdi. It should not end up as being some other stupid thing. No. It's valid only if it comes out with what it started to do, what it set out to do, and that is validity. You go out shopping, you want to buy a shirt which costs 2,500 full sleeve shirt. Your shopping is valid, there is validity, if you end up buying a shirt which costs 2,500. If you end up buying trousers or no other one which costs 1,000 rupees or which costs 4,000 rupees, or a coat, if you end up buying something that you did not set out to buy, your purchase is not valid. So validity in research, again, refers to the research objective. When you set out your objectives, when you say your research questions, and when you say that my research is going to focus on this, and if your research focuses on that from beginning to end and nothing else, your research is valid. It's considered valid. That is validity in research. What is reliability? There are different kinds of reliability, as you are aware. Something is reliable if, supposing there is an experiment, there's a tryout, whoever does that experiment will get the same result, irrespective of who does it, where it is done, how it is done, whatever it is. It has a certain structure. If it is done in exactly that structure, maintaining that structure, and gives out the same result, that is reliable. So reliability refers to what we call test, retest. So if I do an experiment, for example, in a chemistry laboratory, I have the formula. I use that formula, and whoever uses that formula will get exactly the same outcome, the same result. And that is reliable. And therefore, whether I do it 60 years, whether, for example, Skinner has tried it out 60 years ago, 100 years ago, and if I repeat the same experiment, I should get the same result, which means that is a factor called reliability. And what is reliability in research? For example, let's say Larry Serinker has done some research, has come out with something. Let's say somebody has worked a research say, for example, I have done my research on reading skills, bilingual reading methodology. I have done it. Now you also do the same research in exactly the same way that I did it. Replicate what I did. And if you get the same result that I got, that means that procedure is reliable. Anything that is done once and if repeated, the same result comes out, then it is reliability in research. Somebody has worked on developing spoken English in the coastal area of Andhra Pradesh using a certain material. Now, what you do is you take that material, that procedure, and do it with, let's say, the interior farmers in Guntur district. When you follow this in Guntur district, you should get the same result. And you should know where the result is the same, where it is differing, and so on and so forth. If it brings out similar result, that's procedurally and so on, it is reliable. And therefore, both validity and reliability are factors which are very critical for a research. An examiner will try to look at the conclusions. The examiner will look at two things: your interpretation of data, and number two, the conclusions. And when the examiner looks at both these things in your thesis, the examiner turns to chapter 1, where you have spelled out the research questions, you have spelled out the hypotheses. And now she will see how you have defended the research questions, how you have defended the hypotheses. Do the two coincide? Do the two become okay, exactly the same? Then the examiner will say, your research is valid. You have said that I have based my research on Dr. Muralidhar Rao, who has worked on this somewhere there. If your results also coincide with what Dr. Muralidhar Rao did, then the examiner says, okay, good, very good. So you have shown that with that group, that was the result, and with this group also, you'll get almost a similar result. So if you juxtapose the two, then you get the similar result. So your research is reliable. That means a third person or a fourth person who uses your research as a basis will also get a similar result, and that is an assurance given to that researcher. And therefore, reliability and validity are very important features in a test. You'll hear more about reliability and validity in the coming terms. Therefore, all researchers will have objectives, and based on the objectives, research questions. Based on the research questions, your hypotheses. Based on the hypothesis, data collection, experimentation. Based on the data collected, etc., etc., interpretation of data and conclusions, and all of them are related to one another. Finally. Let's go to the last one now, number 6, Nagendra. So here are some practical guidelines and suggestions, and this is my concluding part of my talk. Number 1, these are general ones, so you can just listen. There's no need to write down anything here. Just listen and enjoy, and we will come back to some questions. Very soon I will finish this very question. Number one, therefore, when you do research, it's very important that prior to starting your research, you read well, read very widely. Look at all the possibilities, including reading some researches, whether it's a small paper, or whether it's a thesis, or whether it's a publication or an article or a book, whatever it is, read well. And that will give you ideas about the research that you should be doing, that you would like to think. So, because you need to think about what you want to do. And so, number one. Number two, think of a topic which you like very much. It may be difficult, may be tough, but you like it a lot. You would like to work on that. I'd like to really work on this particular thing. I've got extraordinarily beautiful, wonderful, very bright children with me. Now, how do I take them up more? I like those, that group, etc., etc. I've got slow learners. How do I help them? So, think of a topic which is very close to your heart. Of course, if you fail to think of a topic, your potential supervisor will, of course, come to your rescue. That person will certainly help you will eventually, because sometimes supervisors also can have a few topics and they would like some people to work on those topics as well. Or they will tell you that, well, if you work on this topic, I'll be able to help you out much better. I'm happy helping you out on this, etc. So supervisors are always there to help you out eventually. But this is how you start it. Number three, most important, all of you have a deadline for submission. You know how to work on it? Very easy. This is like reversing a car. Rather than going and parking it like this, you reverse it. You look at the deadline first. Let's say 31st June 19th or something is my deadline. 2025 is my deadline. Start working from June backwards. Okay, if June 25 is my deadline, then my thesis should be ready in May 25, so that I'll have 1 month buffer. I can work on book. So May 25. In order that the thesis is ready and printed by May 30, or at least ready to go to the printer in May, I should finish my major writing at least by February. February 25. I should have finished. Then I get March, April, May. 3 months to write completely, check out. But in order to be ready at February, then I must do my experimentation and interpretation of data by about June in 24. So I must start my experiment in June. Then I work for 6 weeks or 8 weeks for my experimentation, try out library work, blah, blah, blah. And then I have 3 months for it. So June. So June I will start. And in order to start at June, I must have my preparatory period from February, March, April, June. The entire structure of the thesis should be ready for my tryout or library work, whatever it is. So February. So between now, which is December, between now and February, I must try to finalize my topic, my supervisor, etc., etc. You see? In other words, ladies and gentlemen, my suggestion is that you start from the other end and work backwards. This will give you a better perspective. Don't start from this end. What do I do? And 4 months later, oh, I have still not started. Blah, 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 blah. So nothing on this one. And so start from the other end, plan it, and work on that particular one, including your library work, the nature and methodology, field work, if any, according to a schedule, everything, and then planning your writing, and then etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, your presentation, your participation in seminars and conferences, your publication, all this should happen during, and it requires planning, starting from the deadline. Come this way. And so I wish you all the best, because you will submit your thesis and you will defend it. Your supervisor will be happy. You will be happy. Your family will be very happy. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. Now, any questions you have? Nagendra will monitor these questions. Yeah, thank you.
It's open to all the people, can post their questions in the chat box. we'll pick up some questions which are very useful to our fraternity. I request all the participants to post the questions in the chat box, please.
Also, participants can directly unmute their mic and ask the question to
Yes,
the speaker
yes,
directly.
that could also be done.
Yeah, please do that. That would be wonderful. And identify yourself, say where you are, who you are, and ask the question.
Hello, participants.
Participants themselves, they can unmute their mic and then
Dear
ask question.
host, please allow the participants to unmute the mic.
Yeah, it is already given. No?
Okay. Actually,
All
host.
participants.
Yeah, all participants. It's not given, sir.
Yeah. Unmute all.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Yes.
Devang here
Yes.
from Gujarat.
Yes,
Actually, my
Devang.
question,
Yeah, go on.
yes, sir. Actually, my question is that how to choose a particular topic or how to find any research for making research proposal,
As I
which is
told you.
purely based on our
Yeah.
interest, our genre interest, or anything else.
As I told you, finding a research topic is a very complex activity. You will have to search. You will have to start reading at least some 5-6 months in advance. Look at the possible researches that have been done, and then choose your area. And don't spend too much time. As soon as possible, choose 1 or 2 or 3 research areas, and then look for all the resources in the library and elsewhere, and talk to people, talk to potential supervisors also, and then zero in on one particular area of research. And when you bring in one particular area of research, then go deep into it and see what researches have been done in that particular area. And from out of those researches that have been done in that area, you can choose that which is okay for you, you like it, and you are able to carry out research, etc., etc. So you can do it like that, Devang. It takes time, but it's a very critical activity.
Okay,
Hello.
thank you.
Hello.
Sir.
Sir. Hello. Good evening,
Yes.
sir.
Good evening.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah,
You are
carry on.
audible.
Okay. I'm
You're
Asmita.
not visible.
Yeah. I'm Asmita from Bhavnagar, Gujarat. I'm a research scholar. My question is regarding your 5th slide, that is reliability and validity. I just want to know that how can reliability be checked in a qualitative research in literature? For example, my topic is comparative study of mythological women characters in the novels of Chitra Banerjee, the Kavita Kane, and Amish Tripathi. So after ending my thesis, how I can check myself the reliability? This is my question. Yeah.
Good. That's a very good question.
Thank
Good.
you, sir.
What was your name? You said
Asmita.
Asmita. Okay.
Asmita.
Asmita. Now there is a certain.
Hello. So,
Please wait. Some bandwidth problem with the SAR only.
How do I do the comparison? What are the criterion for comparison? Now it's just possible that.
sorry, sir. You were not audible for a minute, for a second.
Okay.
1 minute, right?
I'll come back. Okay. Now, when you examine your research, there is a certain procedure in your research. Now, there is a certain, maybe a theoretical basis on which you can. And it is just possible that somebody else has already done a similar thing somewhere in maybe in Africa or in Australia or somewhere in Europe, comparing 2-3 people on may not exactly this topic, but on similar lines. Now, if you look at that kind of research, and that might suggest a certain methodology to you. Now, if it suggests a certain methodology or investigation, procedure of investigation, or research questions and so on, and if you apply it to your own research now, the results, the outcome may not be very different from the outcome there, which you examine. And you are going to state it. But I did take a look at some of these things, and then I have followed that particular thing in my thesis, and then this is what. So it means that particular procedure that was adopted somewhere, theoretical or practical or whatever it is, works. And so when I do my research after you, Asmita's research, when I do my research on comparing 2 or 3 people like this on similar lines, I will look at Asmita. And then I'll look at that research which Asmita has looked at. And so you see, that procedural detail becomes standard, something which is feasible. And therefore, that is reliable. And so all that Asmita can say is, I'll contact you and you say, oh, no problem. You apply this particular procedure, which I did, and you're bound to get the result. Finished. Reliability. Do you understand? Am I clear to you?
Yes, sir, very much. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So thank you so much for the wonderful session. And this is Anand from Aligarh, UP. Sir, my question will be much similar to this Asmita ma'am. Sir, actually, I'm an ELT person, so my question will be from ELT perspective. Sir, you just mentioned that if we apply the same technique, result will also be the same. That's why it's reliable. But sometimes the practices, the teaching practices, and the curriculum, keep changing.
Yeah.
So when, as a scholar, when and how to check the reliability?
It's not that it should be 100% replicable. No, it's not replicated 100%. No, there are certain features in a certain research where certain features are replicable. You can replace. Once again, you can do it. Whereas, when you look at the outcome, what happens to you is that, okay, if I look at that research, almost 50% of the result will match with what has already been done. Then there may be certain differences. Now, I have worked on those differences. And therefore, the third person will say, okay. So, reliability in that sense need not be always 100%, in ELT particularly, because variables are there. So, by and large, we talk of reliability in research as something which is fairly reliable, modestly reliable by and large. So, but reliability and validity are valid criteria, parameters. That's all that we would like to say. So, in the research, in case you identify somebody else's research as a research model and you replicate it, it's just possible that you might discover that X percentage of that research is reliable.
Sure, thank you. So it's about reliability. Suppose before we send the things to the supervisor, it should be the best draft from our side.
Yes.
So that the things will be easier for him or her.
Yeah. See,
so sir, how and when to check the reliability as a scholar? Because you told me from the examiners and how to.
You're now at that stage where you are interpreting data. Now, during interpretation, actually what you should be doing is go back to your research questions. you bring them in here. And your interpretation is within the confines. And when you do that, you will examine that this particular, my research, which was based on, let's say, somebody's research, almost coincides with what I have found there. And so my hypotheses are proved. They work. They're reliable. So before you get into your conclusions, in your interpretation, that is the stage where you check on reliability factor. And then you assure yourself, and then your supervisor will ask, have you checked whether the research you based on that has worked here also? Have you checked, etc.? Oh, yeah, yes, sir, I have checked. Well, sir, checked it with either Scopus or this or that, whatever it is, whatever you want. Oh, I've done my statistical imputation. This that. So you're very confident, because the examiner is going to ask you, or is going to ask how is your thesis different from what that person has done.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, somebody.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, myself,
Yes,
I'm from
Raja.
Hyderabad,
Yes, Rajagopal.
and I have a doubt.
Yes.
Same thing I asked